Hello and welcome to DM&D chat here on the Double Tinkered Discord server. I am Jim, aka Argent Wind, and I am your host today. As we are, I'm on a I'm actually not in my normal studio. I'm actually on vacation right now, but I wanted to jump in and do our rescheduled episode here that we tried to a couple weeks ago and had some technical issues with voices and everything else. So hopefully I'm coming through okay now. But with that, actually, let me just verify that it is working. Let me just see. Yep, it sounds like it's working. Good, good, good. So, um, we are talking about dealing with loss, and means a lot of different things in our games. I mean, obviously, in a combat-heavy game, there's obviously death happening all the time. You're killing off enemies, you're beating bad guys, but the reason this topic came up there, the question came to me regarding how to deal with the loss of a character. And what basically not only in story in game, but in the logistics of like how long do you wait for bringing somebody new in or bringing a new character in? Um, yes, yes, I can. Thank you, Dow. I can see lips wiggling and sounds coming out. This is a very good sign. Um, so dealing with the loss of a character, depending on the world you're in, loss is going to be going to have different levels of severity. Obviously, in a game like Dungeons and Dragons, where you have things like Revivify and Raise Dead and Resurrection, loss is often not a permanent thing. You can usually bring characters back, but in certain settings or certain people's games, they're or at a very low level, those things you don't have access to. So losing a character can be a permanent thing, or at least semi-permanent. And so, what do you do? Well, there's a lot of different ways to approach this. And in a game with a high lethality factor, where people are going to die and there's not a good way to come back, you have to figure that player, that person that they're playing that character, has to sit out for a while. If they're just watching and listening for a bit here, but the idea is don't want to be too long because it's no fun to just sit there and watch. So a lot of times you're talking about bringing a new character in. Now, certain systems, it's very easy to generate characters, and so you just churn one out and throw in somebody new into the mix. Things like Dungeon Crawl Classics is the perfect one for this. Or there are some other versions of very high lethal games where the character creation takes a couple of minutes, and you just turn out a new character and send somebody new into the mill. But in games that are very narrative driven and very long form, there's a lot more going on. And so with those players that are out, you typically want to work in a new character in sort of an organic fashion in a way that makes sense for the story. Finding a way for them to be a part of the story, this new character they're bringing in. You also want to spend time with them, kind of checking in with what kind of character they want to bring, what they want to bring into the mix, what they want to try something new or try something different and bring into the story. Now, players will sometimes have their own ideas, or sometimes you've had to supply them with ideas. We recently had a change here. If you saw on Avarice, Grimbar joined us. And in order to bring Grimbar in a way that wasn't just like, hey, new character, I made sure he had a connection to people that the players already had in the story. So, in other words, they were people that the players had dealt with, had worked with, and this person was somebody that they knew that they brought up as part of the new team. There, suggestion of hey, you're down a person. Here's somebody that can help you out. So, a lot of times, people that have those connections, people that have those NPCs within the story, will have a way to bring in a new character that makes sense. And it isn't so crazy situational of just new person on street joins party. That can be fun, but it can also lead to some very difficult ways of transitioning in a new player, a new character. Now, if a player leaves and you're bringing an entirely new player, that can take a little more time. You want to spend time kind of talking to them about the game so they know enough to be able to step in and play a character or get to know things. When you're bringing in a brand new person, there's a lot that's been going on in the world, especially for a long running campaign. Bringing in Grim, I'd spent like a lot of time talking back and forth about what his character would know about the world and where he fit into the world. Um, what he knew as a character, what his character would know about the party, if anything. And he knew very little coming in, other than that they knew somebody else that he worked with. So it really depends on the situation how you want to push it forward. But the main thing, as with so many things within D&D, is communication, talking it over, making sure that the players are aware what's happening, making sure the new person is aware what's happening here, and then letting things unfold. You don't need to force it. You don't need to shove it down their throats, but you do need to give it a chance to grow and build and have it make sense in a way that works for the story, works for all the people involved. So whether you're dealing with a new character or a whole new player, those are the so that dealing with it, because every change you go through is going to have an impact on the story, on the dynamic of the group dynamic, even the both in and out of the game. So, take some time. It's not gonna be perfect the second you hit the table, but it's gonna be one of those things that has to kinda grow over time. A similar situation is when you have a guest player come on. We did have, we were very lucky to have OKS to DM, jump in and did do an episode with us. It was a lot of fun, but again, that same thing of preparing them ahead of time. Here's what you know. Here's what your character is like, and here's where they fit into the world. They can step into the role and be a part of the team essentially for a good time. Um, so, with that, some other ways that loss comes into effect. Um, Not only loss of the players, but loss of NPCs. When an NPC is taken out, it can have a very heavy impact on the story, but only if you've made that NPC significant in some way. Either they're a leader of a city, a valued ally to the party, or a friend of a friend kind of thing. They need to have, for that loss to have any form of impact on the story, on the characters, there needs to be a way that that person was introduced and brought into the story that makes them important. And I'll freely admit, the first time I ran Avarice, first time I ran a campaign in Avarice, I had a very important NPC that when they died, the players went because they didn't deal with them. They didn't have any interaction with them. They didn't have any connection to them. So it didn't have an impact. Even the bad guys, when you take down a villain in the game, if that villain hasn't been a part of the story, hasn't been a part of the thing there that the players have interacted with or dealt with in some way or seen that interplay, the loss of that villain doesn't mean anything. Your BBEG, if they've never known who the guy is, they've never dealt with them and been, okay, there's a bad guy out there. And then suddenly they'd go in and kill the bad guy. Well, it doesn't have any impact if they haven't had, if it's built up to anything. So it becomes a matter of how does that NPC fit into the story? How are they connected to them? Same with the villains. How are they connected to the party? How are they been driving the story? And so that way, the loss of that NPC has a significant impact, both to the story and to the players, but also the villain. If the villain is lost, how does that drive the story forward? How does that impact the players? Is it really an accomplishment if they never dealt with the guy and all of a sudden they just take him down in one fight? That's not really much of an accomplishment anymore. So again, that building up to and forming that connection to that character is what makes the loss significant. What makes it actually important to the story. So how do we do that? Well, again, it's a recurring villain, somebody that they dealt with over time. It's a recurring NPC that the players have interacted with. Those connections they make that happen over time are what will make that loss or that change have an impact. So keep that in mind when you're driving the story forward. Is if you just say, "Oh yeah, bad guy, here he is, get him," they're not gonna have any real sense of accomplishment or any sense of what's going on, like, what this means to them moving forward. Um, so in dealing with that loss, well, remember, the NPCs around that person, the villain's henchmen or allies are going to have an impact on that. So the loss of an NPC, well, the townsfolk that know them are going to have that loss as well. So that should be reflected in the story, and there's now a hole to fill potentially within the townsfolk or within an organization of some kind. If the Duke of a keep is defending places there and he gets taken out, who moves into his place? Maybe someone from the party. Maybe a lieutenant the party has worked with has now elevated to a higher ranking position, and now there's a real uh, story-driven element to who is in that new role. That becomes again a significant connection for the party. The loss represents then an opportunity to grow the party's connections to the world, to a location, to an organization. Same with the villains. If the big bad is taken out, well, what's to say a lieutenant of that person doesn't step into their place and try to push the story forward again? So occasionally you may have a situation where your villain, you have this idea for a BBEG, the party has an encounter that it's supposed to be the situation where the villain is going to get away, and the villain gets just squashed, taken out by the party, no chance of survival. Well, you can do things like, eh, try to GM Fiat or Deus Ex Machina that kind of way. He survives and whatever, and those can work, but they can also feel really kind of cheated um, if they lose that accomplishment there. So what you do instead is that wasn't the real bad guy. There's somebody above him, or he's actually working for somebody else, and let the story drive that way. That oh yeah, you took this guy out, but he's only the lieutenant. The general is still in place, and that's the person you're trying to go for now. And so that big accomplishment is still an accomplishment, but it's not the ending. There's more to it. There's more to go, and so that's something that you can keep in mind here. Is that loss doesn't have to be an ending. It can be a stepping off point for a new story or the next phase in what's going to happen. And allow the parties to have that accomplishment, to take down that bad guy. But there's more out there. There's more to deal with. And so you kind of drive the story along. Um, so that loss becomes an opportunity. Um, Also, don't forget a high level, especially in D&D or high fantasy games or even like certain sci-fi games. Um, you have things like, well, clones. Um, D&D high level spellcasters have clones. There's no reason they couldn't have a clone to come back to. Um, they may have high level allies that can resurrect, that can bring them back in some fashion. So you have that opportunity. Loss does not have to be a permanent thing. In a sci-fi realm, maybe they have some sort of a. I mean, I've seen it in Shadowrun or certain other fantasy games here where they can download their consciousness into a new body. That's something that can be really fun with the story there. You take them out, but you only took out the shell. That the real bad guy is still out there. Same thing can happen in D&D. Where you can have an evil spirit possessing somebody else. Um, Now, I'm not saying that's what's happening in my game, but um, I mean, Wraith better not be working under someone. I mean, come on, he's obviously working with other people, so these things are still out there. Um, it's it's one of those things of maybe there's something out there. Remember, villains have a hierarchy. Obviously, Star Wars, Vader was working for the Emperor. And so, though you beat Darth Vader, there's still somebody above him. There's still somebody he's working for. And that's the person who's the real threat, even though the main villain is here. So there's always a chance that you can drive on to a new level of threat, a new higher level of dealing with things. Um, so other forms of loss. Losing companions can be a big deal. It can definitely be a learning experience if the player is careless with someone. um, Uh, there's always a chance that somebody gets taken down. Yes, exactly, Reese. So losing a companion can be something important to the story as well, um, and can be something that drives you on to something new. Um, let's see. Yeah, so yeah, having somebody working with other people there is obviously uh, an issue, a thing to work with there. Um, there's there's an opportunity with loss to um, work to regain that something. When someone is taken down, you can then bring an opportunity for how to get them back, how to drive a part of the story. The idea that uh, Reese in Avarice was taken down, a serial killer, a serial shapeshifting serial killer took his place, but then the loss of him introduced an ability that the players would have access to for a resurrection type thing. So Reese was brought back because of the item that the priestess had within the city, the town they were living in. Then that item was stolen, and that drove on a whole new piece of the story. So that loss weaved into the larger narrative that happened. So it was an opportunity to introduce this fact that there's somebody in the city that can do this, which is a very which allows you to then do more with the story there. And yes, when I get careless, you murder your friends. Not always. Um, Getting careless may be the loss of an item, some item that is stolen from you. Then there's a story to get to retrieve it, get it back. It could be the loss of important information that you need to go and rediscover and find a different way. Loss of an asset you might have had otherwise. So again, loss has so many different forms, but every loss is an opportunity to grow and to move on to something new. Um, yeah, it's so it really becomes a matter of what do you do with it? Loss is not an end. Um, it's a way to drive the story forward. Even losing multiple party members again can bring in a new ally. The party was taken down. They were then introduced to some potential allies for the future, or someone that acted as an ally stepped up to help them in a way that was more significant than they realized. So again, every game, every role playing game out there, every story you read, it's loss is a significant thing. Loss is a part of what drives the story. If you didn't lose anything, there'd be nothing to ever really go and do. You don't need to find something if you never lost anything, you never had to worry about anything that was could be taken away from you, then where would the impetus where would be your impetus to grow and change and become stronger and move on and learn more? So remember that loss is without loss there wouldn't be change. So um if you guys want to throw some questions out there a little bit early at me, that's fine here. We can kind of keep going here. But um, so you have losses of party members, of people, players can leave, and how to deal with that. You have loss when it comes to both NPCs and allies, also the villains and all of them. Those losses also have a big part of the story. Losses of your assets, losses of your items, or things that loss of opportunities potentially. Those are all various facets of loss that come into play during your games. Um, see any questions popping up there for the moment here? Not just yet. Okay. Um, a scenario. We talked about various things in game here, but something else that can be a part of. Loss can be the start of a game. Literally, think about the whole start of a game being the loss of some powerful item that the party needs to go and retrieve and find. That becomes a whole basis for a campaign. Um, once the player destroyed a town, okay, what do you do then? That's something that's if a player obviously um, if a player does something that causes a major loss, well, it depends on what the scenario is there. If it's something they did where they need to be punished for that, well, that player may become the villain. And so the player transitions to a new character while that character that they were playing becomes the villain who gets away, and now you have to hunt them down. That they become the big BBEG. Um, if it's a situation where they destroy a town, um, is the party who's left over going to help them rebuild? Are they going to be uh, making penance or recompense in some way to help? Are they going to be indebted to the townsfolk for helping to fix what was happened? You run out of time, never look back. And they can, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, Dragon. There, sometimes the party members, if they're those murder hobo types, they just burn it all and leave. That can be something that happens there. Of course, the fun thing that happens there is that by doing that, they now have a price on their head. Now they're going to be hunted by bad guys or hunted by bounty hunters or the actual authorities. And now you're looking at sort of an on the run villain campaign. The players are all playing the bad guys. And what are they going to do to get out of that? Just keep killing everything that comes after them? Maybe, but eventually it's going to get to the point where they're going to be dealt with. So yeah, that's it depends on what the situation and what your players are like in there. Um, yeah, they may not know they are the bad guys. They may think they may think they're doing the right thing, but that's part of the discovery of the game is that they realize that, oh, that person was actually important, and or that the thing we did in the town there is not just some little podunk town. Now um, there's going to be a rather difficult situation here where they have to come to terms with, are they okay with being the bad guys? Do they want to turn over a new leaf? Do they want to continue down that path? Do they want to be the villains of the story? Well, that's where, yeah, your bad bounty hunters coming after them, and the cool thing there is you can make some really cool bounty hunters. Um, think about the classic bounty hunters from Star Wars, of course. I mean, you got Boba Fett and the whole crew there. Like now they're the the villain, the people that are their adversaries can have cool names and cool style and cool ideas, and so you're basically now being hunted by a party of adventurers like them, and those makes for some fun fights. When you have a party of like-minded, powerful people, um, that's going to be a rather interesting time when suddenly the bad guys have access to all the same abilities and spells and equipment that they have, or similar things. Um, the counterspell duels of multiple spellcasters are always a famous situation there. Um, uh, the player's arch nemesis, the consequence of their own selfish actions. Exactly. That loss, that thing that drove them into this thing, um, can now become, yeah, you have your arch nemesis who's going to start throwing more and more at them. It's going to become more and more powerful because they made a choice that led to a rather big consequence. They're being hunted. They're being watched. There more and more powerful things are going to come at them. Let's see. Have you had a DM give you a crap ton of magic gear, then have it all taken away by gelatinous Q? How you deal with that now, or have no magic gear? That's a tough one. That's a tough one. The difficulty I find with taking away people's items becomes a situation where if it's just arbitrary, if it's just like, Oh, the gelatinous cube. How would a gelatinous cube take away their magic gear? It depends. I mean, yeah, I mean, it is if you're super rich, then you just buy more. But what if your goal was all taken away? Well, now it's almost that reset kind of thing, which can be an interesting campaign idea. How to deal with that kind of a loss of now we're transported to a different place and we're the same people, but all of our stuff is gone. And here we are in this new place with none of our cool things. What do we do? That can make for a very interesting scenario, if not for a campaign. Um, I've talked about games like this with a friend of mine, where you're all playing like high level characters with nothing. You walk in with no gear, no nothing. So, boop, here you are. Um, wizard spell, taking wizard spellbook away. Who would do that? I don't know who would do such a thing like that. That is that is a tricky thing to do. That's again a loss to deal with, and then to try to rebuild and do more and figure out more. That's uh, again a loss, turning into opportunity for a new adventure of some kind. So all these situations where the idea um, the idea of getting those things back or finding what happened so they can get back to where they came from, where they have all their cool stuff again. That's a fun that's a fun way to incorporate a loss that becomes part of the story and part of the it makes for a very interesting adventure. Um, so Dragon, there, like the idea of running a game where the party is hunted by D&D used versions of the most famous bounty hunters from pop culture. Oh yeah, I mean, um, yeah, you definitely a situation where you just make cool versions of. I mean, you if you go online, you will find all sorts of places where people have built like pop culture icons, both comic books, movies, and other genres of shows and everything else that have built D&D versions of those guys there, and bringing them into a story can make for a crazy fun version in addition to a story. Um, yep. Lost on a deserted island without your kit are always fun adventures. Yeah, the idea is that you're stranded somewhere, and now it becomes, but that part of the game, if not the entire game, potentially becomes how do you get back? How do you? It's like you've lost everything other than yourself and what you can do outside of your equipment. How do you get back? That could be a very fun way to run a story or run either a small campaign or a couple sessions or something. That'd be fun way to go to. Um, of course, yeah, never do that. But no, I mean, it again. If you never take something away, it never has any value. If you never have the threat of losing something, then it doesn't have uh, it's too easy. If what dealing with loss is how we drive story, how we make changes, how we grow as both people, as both our characters, as the story progresses. That loss driven adventures make for a lot more impactful stories. Um, so again, more questions, more comments there. Um, It reminds I'm reminded of a game where, um, a friend of mine, that I play with and I've known for a long time now, ran a game where it was all about regaining things. It was a Groundhog Day scenario where nothing you had was ever permanent because you always woke up back on the same day with the same things you started with, and it became an idea of it's never really about finding stuff and keeping it. It's how do I gain this asset and then use it moving forward and see can I get past this loop I'm in? So a cool thing to consider there is in that situation, there's no loss of items, especially. because it's you're only borrowing it for a certain amount of time and then restoring it. So what do you get to keep? What do you get to hold on to in that scenario where you don't get a situation of here's how much time I have, here's all these cool items I have. It's no, I'm me. I'm the only thing that I've got. My abilities that I have might grow over time, but those things that I have, or even those people that I developed a connection with, that connection is gone the next day. So that continuous playing with loss is it makes for a very different scenario. Kind of fun too. Um, so there's never a right time for it, and how do you decide when it's the best time to have your players deal with the loss of a beloved NPC? Um, really, that's a very good question there, and it's a lot of times it's sometimes you can plan for it. Sometimes you know a situation is coming, and it's finding when that is going to have the impact it needs to have. The idea that and this was my mistake in the first version of Avarice. I didn't pick the right time. I had a loss happen that was just there was it the players kind of went, "Eh?" Because they didn't have the connection. So it does become an issue of if you want there to be an impact on the story, and have the players be invested in dealing with that loss, then you have to develop that connection. Give it some time. Give it a chance to grow. And you can tell when your players, if the players are continuing going back to a person or talking about them a lot, if it's a favorite shopkeeper or a favorite person who runs like the town or whatever else that, they're going to have that connection because you hear them talking about it. You hear them, they seek them out, they look for them. Um, and so the players, your players are invested in a person when they show that in the game, when they continually work with them or try to incorporate them into their own story. So if you want it to have an impact, you wait for that. If it's something that plot based, this person needs to die or be taken or kidnapped or in some way taken out of the picture for a plot to move forward, that becomes the impetus, the reason for doing it. So it's the right time is a tricky thing. There's a balance there. If you do it too soon, the players aren't going to really care. If you do it too arbitrarily, the players are going to feel betrayed potentially. But at the same time, offering a way, making sure that they understand there is a way to get them back. There's a way to retrieve that and move and regain what they lost. That becomes the what drives the party forward into doing it. If there's no way for them to get it back, if there's no possibility of that person or that thing to come back to them, they're going to feel helpless. They're going to feel maybe even a lot of times be betrayed. So it becomes an issue of what do you do to bring them back? What you do? How do they deal with the loss? And is there a way for them to overcome the loss? That's a tricky part. Um, yeah, you can always tell when the players find their favorite NPCs. It's like when the ones they talk about, the ones they seek out, the ones they go to. Um, if a character is dead, like not coming back for one reason or other, would you allow the players to have a funeral or celebration of them and just try to move on and distract them from it? I think it depends on the actual. I mean, obviously, having a chance to role play that celebration of loss, I guess you might want to look at it that way. Having a funeral, I think is important. I mean, we did it for the character there um, that was lost in Avarice. Um, and it also gives a sense of closure. If they know that this ceremony has been taking place, at least you know that there's not likely the reason for this way for this person to come back. Um, so that's something that it's important to if a loss is going to be permanent, having them have a funeral um, uh, is at least a way for them to put it behind them and move on. And then, yeah, like every superhero movie, when they eventually come back again, it's a big surprise because, hey, we put them in the ground. How are they back? They're cremated. How are they back? Well, that becomes a significant part of the story, then, doesn't it? But the loss, at least, is very real at that point, and at least in some aspect, permanent, um, because the ceremony's been had. Um, yeah, it's just superhero genre, any genres that involve like the the rebirth or regrowth or regeneration or reincarnation or resurrection. There's so many different ways in stories, especially fantasy stories, for people to come back in some fashion. That it almost becomes a trick of the story as to why they don't come back. Um, as uh, they learned in Avarice, um, the reason that someone may or may not come back has to deal with how they were killed and what they were killed by, um, uh, and what the consequences down the road are. What that will happen, how that will happen in the future. Um, it's it becomes part of the story. It becomes part of the lore of your world as to this thing you're killed by. You can't come back from that, or there's something in the other side, the Shadowfell, the afterlife, hell, whatever it is that prevents them from coming back. That becomes this powerful enough characters could then go and try to do something to circumvent that or change it or do anything else, um, or make it so that the party can be that person can be brought back. That becomes a pretty epic part of the story then if you have to go into hell to fight for that person's soul so they can be brought back into the world. That's a pretty significant pretty significant expenditure of effort. Um, so question there from Dragon. What do you do if PCs really want to resurrect below dead NPC? It does not make sense for your campaign or story. um that's a tough one. I think if you're being intentional about the loss, if there's a really story-driven reason why they're gone, why they're taken out, there needs to be in associated with that something at least in your mind or something that you keep in mind of why they just can't just come back. Why is it they just I'll just cast resurrection. We got a person to do raised dead. There's a body here. Let's do this. And so it becomes an issue of what makes a permanent loss. It will really it will really change. I mean, that's why in some campaigns and some stories there is no option for resurrection. Death is permanent, and that's the immediate. It's something you kind of establish as part of the world, part of the world building you've done, or your campaign, your story. You're dead. You're dead. There's no coming back from it. But if there is a way, then there needs to be a reason why they just can't do that thing. Why they can't just bring them back. So again, the if you're intentional about the loss, be intentional about what's going to keep them gone, at least temporarily. Again, there may be a way to overcome that, but it can't just be a fifth level spell that just says, "Hey, I got a body here, raised dead, boop, they're back." Um, so yeah, keep that in mind. If they really really want it, then make them work for it. Make them jump through all those hoops. Make them traverse into hell and fight the god of the underworld who has to like essentially then release the soul to them so they can be put back into the body and brought back. That's huge. But again, a little party not going to happen. But down the road, it's something that happens when they're higher level, much higher level, and they work toward that and make them part of the goal that they want to do. You got to have a party driven story of this is their goal, this is what they're trying for. Work in some other aspects of that story. Work on some other things that can happen along with that. To kind of drive it along there. So, question from Sora there. Should you take an NPC and they don't get to come back? How do you introduce a new NPC the players will enjoy? Um, After a while, you kind of get a feel for what kind of people they like. It's fun to make someone they don't like too. Make a jerk NPC, someone they're like, oh my god, this guy. Um, I like the old guy better. Well, yeah, of course I did too, but um, it becomes now maybe there's a rival that's going to step up and fill in that gap or fill in that role. Really, it can be a fun way to incorporate twists on the old NPCs you've always had. Um, or maybe they have an apprentice who steps up, and that person is different but still lovable in some way. Or um, a family member like comes in, or you want to just be really goofy about it, and maybe they've got somebody who's their twin brother who's almost exactly the same, or I mean, uh, there's no twins in the world. There, Echo Gecko, um, Nix. Um, but that way, yeah, if you have a limited PC, maybe there's a reason why there's more than one of them. I mean, Matt, in Critical Role, there had Pumat Soul. There were five of them running around that all manned a shop together, and that sort of becomes um, why that's um, you got you kind of build that into the character itself. There, why is there another one that's just like the old one? That could be fun. Um, it could be a fun way to go. Um, let's see. I'm gonna scroll back a little bit there. You guys are talking about that. This is good. Um, set the soul out of suck out a soul meaning NPC cannot be resurrected. You then find a way for this find the soul and lay the person to rest. Is there then a way to bring this said NPC back? Um, I mean, potentially. I'm not gonna say never. I would just say that's something that could be looked into, investigated. Um, it really kind of comes down to where did it go, what happened to it, and is there a way? There may be. I can't say yes or no, um, but I mean, I can obviously, but I'm not going to say that outside of game here. But the idea that that's something that can be looked into, um, and is there a way? Uh, I mean, again, what happened to it? Where is it? Not there anymore. Um, but that's something that, again, you may need to have the right NPCs to help you because if your party is not having someone who's that's their specialty, how do you find it out? How do you discover it? So check it out and see. Um, let's see. We should be mindful of avoiding replacing a beloved character with someone that PCs really hate, like what happened when the Family Guy killed off Brian and replaced him with Vinny. Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to. I mean, you don't want to bring in the Scrappy Doo syndrome either, of like bringing in somebody who just like is annoying and obnoxious and nobody likes them. Uh, that's something that's you end up having the idea of somebody you just don't like becomes an issue of how do we get rid of this guy now? Of course, the fun part about that is it might drive them off to somebody else, or they may be like, hey, they really hate this guy, so they want to put somebody else in their place there. It's going to be more. There's going to be more like the old guy or whatever. Again, story wise, you can just um, mess around with um, uh, the party being invested in making a change. Uh, so not everyone's going to be awesome and lovable. So how do you either get them to change their obnoxious ways, or how do we get them to move into a more fun interplay with that NPC? Maybe he's just a jerk for a reason, and make it you get on his good side, and he's not so obnoxious after all. That could be a fun way to go too. Um, could there be a way of players helping NPC deal with the loss of loved ones? Yeah, I mean, the idea of that being a story or a part of an adventure or part of a plot of how to help an NPC. Um, again, if it's a matter of finding a way to bring them back, if it's a finding a way to to go avenge their death, or stop that from happening to anyone else. That becomes a driving factor in a story. Um, so the players can help in that aspect there. If they can't actually help with bringing them back, then bringing them closure or taking out the guys that stop them, that caused the problem in the first place. That's a great way to look at a story adventure or story arc, especially is if somebody hurt somebody that you cared about, then what do you go do about it? Hunt them down, stop them. You become the bounty hunters yourself, going after a bad guy who's done these terrible things. That's kind of what a lot of plots are in D&D is, hey, someone's being a bad guy, someone's being a jerk, let's go stop them. Um, let's go stomp them into the ground and prevent them from continuing to doing what they're doing. Um, so that loss then drives a new aspect of the story, and so it may not be happening directly to the players, but somebody they know, or what becomes the part of the plot, to why the players go where they go. Um, Replace a dead party member with a lovable character that's the villain's war buddy. Um, yeah, that could definitely make for a very interesting change. Obviously, um, again, that bringing in a new character is, and this kind of brings us around a little full circle here. The original question we had here is, how do you bring in new characters? How do you bring in that person when there's a loss like that? Um, it does become what you hope that what you bring into the party to fill that void is going to be something that helps everyone. Maybe helps deal with the loss of the character. Maybe helps fill the gap of something that players' skills are now gone, and somebody who comes in to kind of fill in that space, that role. It becomes a way to change the party composition in a way that maybe benefits everybody. Saying, "Hey, the party could really use this," or "The party has lost this. How do we bring something in to fill that role?" That becomes an issue of what do you do with them? How do you fix them? How do you help the party move forward, um, in a way that's going to make them grow, make them better overall? Say the group lost a player, not the character. They don't get along with a new player. That's a tricky one. Um, that is very tricky. And so, I mean, it gets into some real conversations, and talking things over. If the group and the new player just don't mesh, and there's no way for them to really come to consensus and really come together as a group, then as a DM, it becomes kind of the hard call of, hey, this isn't working out. We really don't want this to turn into a situation that's not fun for people, and this situation is just not working. And so, while we appreciate your time here, we're gonna have to ask somebody else to step in instead. It's it's being diplomatic. It's being, again. Sometimes some things just don't work. Some players just don't mesh, and to force them to play together, it really doesn't. It takes away from the fun, and this is supposed to be fun. And if the player comes along and there there's very few times when a new player steps in and it doesn't work, that they just go, they don't know this. Um, and sometimes it's a character they brought in, and maybe a different character would work instead, or just a change to the dynamic could work as well. But sometimes it doesn't work, and so you have to make the call of, "Hey, this isn't working out. Let's let's try something different," because you don't want to have an existing group of existing party members introduce a new element that just breaks the whole thing. Uh, there's going to be time that you have to give it time to grow. You have to give it time to check out there, but you have to be honest with it too. If it's not working, it's not working. And it's not going to work for anyone if you force it and continue to have a situation where people are uncomfortable, people are not enjoying themselves. So be honest, have the conversations. And it's, again, loss represents opportunity to grow. If loss doesn't, then something else needs to happen. Um, if the changes that come about because of the loss don't work, something's got to change. So don't be afraid to have the conversations and be honest. You've got to be honest about it. Um, Spoken like a true villain's buddy now. I think some players love to shake things up with the characters they bring in or the situations that they push on everybody else. Um, it, Sometimes you've got to rein it in. Sometimes you just got to lean in and let the chaos happen. And so that that hole left by the loss that you have there, you hope gets filled in with something that helps things move forward, that helps people have fun and enjoy where the players all go. So help with that as much as you can. If you can help front load that and saying, hey, this is going to work. This is going to be helpful. This is going to be awesome. Talk to them outside of game. Talk to them again. Communication is such a huge part of this that um, we don't deal with loss without communication. We've got to talk about it. We've got to work through it. We've got to try different things, and it's not all going to work. It's not all going to be easy. But you have an opportunity to to let change go in a new direction that's fun for everybody. So I hope that helps out there. I hope that answers some of the questions. Got time for one more question if you want to jump in here. If anybody else has one to throw in, using my teacher wait time here. Yes, I was a teacher for a while, and so I know how wait time works. That is something that one last little tip here while we wait for a question here. Um, as a DM, and this, I mean, it's DM tips in general, DM tips there, but let the players choose. Um, Let them drive things when they can. And sometimes you need to get out of the way and let it happen. It's hard as DMs. We tend to want to shove things and move things around here, but let the players decide how they want to deal with a loss, how they want to deal with a situation that's happening in a game there. Give them some time. They may not know right off the top of their head what to do, but if you give them some time, let them work it out among themselves here. They can take you in some really fun directions, really fun ways of of something you may not have considered. Uh, yes, let Dow loose. Uh, I don't think anyone could let Dow not be loose. Dow is going to go where Dow is going to go. Um, but no, I mean, I would love to see more folks drive the story, drive their own story. Um, and so when you want something to go in a direction there, let them go. Give them the reins and just be along for the ride and just throw rocks in their path and see what happens. That is such a fun part of running D&D is like what happens when the players drive things. Um, yeah, three people in a trench coat. Um, no, I think I mean I would love to see more folks like Dow there just drive things in a way that um, uh, we don't all expect. But they can be a lot of fun and understand that we're all going to go no because we don't we don't all embrace the chaos in the same way, but it makes for a fun story and for a fun ride. So Well, in that case, unless another question pops up in here, we're gonna go things wrap things up here for the day. I hope this helps. I hope this um, does answer a lot of questions, and it's a difficult situation. Loss is never easy, and so in various ways, and in in various scenarios that we have where loss is involved, but it is a part of life. It's a part of games. It's a part of stories, and so without it, there wouldn't be much of a story. So keep that in mind is that while it's never an easy thing, it is essential. And so we hope that we can all overcome it and move things along here. Ooh, last question. Okay, good. Would you ever, as a DM, kill off a character that wasn't meshing with the rest of the group, or is that too naughty? I typically wouldn't just kill off a character that wasn't meshing with the group there. I kind of find that they get themselves killed. um, Because a lot of the ways that the characters aren't meshing with the party is they're just doing their own thing and not listening to the party, or they're being reckless, or they're holding back when they shouldn't, or they're just not helpful. So a lot of times, characters that really don't mesh kind of get themselves taken out of the picture. So, I mean, you don't want to just force it to happen, but there are going to be opportunities where either they're rushing off ahead and getting themselves killed because they're not doing what the party wants to do, or they're holding back and the party goes ahead and they get left behind and something bad happens to them because of it. I mean, it's it can definitely happen. Um, uh, and and yeah, when they won't reel another character. They might, and maybe they'll hopefully they will learn from that situation and bring in somebody that's more helpful. And if you have to, as a DM, saying, "Hey, let's focus on someone who's going to do more with the party and let's going to be a little bit more well, and if they won't, well, it happens again, and that's where if it continues to happen, that's where you kind of have that frank conversation of, hey, this isn't working out. You're just not uh this is not working out with this party, with this group of people here. So um but I don't think it's naughty. I think it's one of those things of it happens. Depending on how they're not meshing and how the thing it's inevitable. If someone is not meshing with the party, these games require teamwork, and if you're not going to be part of the team, you're going to get squashed. You're going to be lost. Um, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. I hope that helps out. But yes, I hope that we all get to have lot more fun here. As always, if you are watching out there, if you are looking for games, there are new games popping up on Tumble Tankard all the time. We have a couple new ones that are just starting up here, and some new DMs that are getting ready to start some games. So if you're looking for a game, check it out. If you're looking to run some games, we got lots of players who want to play. We have some one shots that are happening. There's always more one shots going on here. Do you want to just jump in and try something? Feel free. Please. We'd love to have more people. But the link is in the description, or you can check in with us here. We can send you links that way. But I hope you'll join us for some more games, some more fun, and more DM tips in the future. Yes, again, thank you very much, Nans. Here, I'm glad we all all worked out all of our weird little sound issues, and it's good to see that we're up and running. But with that, we'll call things here for today. Thanks for being here. As always, we love having you here at the Tankard, and stop by again here. Drinks are on us. We'll see you again real soon. Bye, everyone.